Today we're going to continue working with fractions. We're going to use our knowledge of the unit fraction. Remember, that's one part out of the total parts in one whole, to help us create non-unit fractions again. Today, we're going to work with pictures instead of manipulatives like pattern blocks. Take a look at the problem of the day. How did you represent this situation? Say your answer out loud. I heard you say that you represented the rectangular garden split into 6 equal sections like this. Notice how I made halves first, and then partitioned each of my halves into thirds to have 6 equal pieces. What next? I heard you say that you labeled each section with the unit fraction of 1/6. How did you know that the unit fraction was 1/6? Say your answer out loud. I heard you say that you know the unit fraction is 1/6 because there are 6 equal parts, and one of those parts is 1/6. We know that unit fractions are the building block of non-unit fractions. Another way to think about that is non-unit fractions are made up of copies of the unit fraction. What did you do next? I heard you say that you labeled each section based on what Chloe and her dad were planting in the garden. If you didn't label each section using the problem, go ahead and do that now. I'm going to use abbreviations so that they can fit into the spaces. So I see they planted corn, green beans, cucumbers, tomatoes, butternut squash, and spaghetti squash. What fraction will be used to plant squash? And how do you know? Say your answer out loud. I heard you say that we will use 2/6 for squash. Prove it. That's right. I heard you say that you know because each part is 1/6. And there are 2 parts, the butternut squash and the spaghetti squash, that are going to be used for squash. 2 parts or 2 copies of 1/6 is the same as 2/6. Now that we've figured out how much they'll use for squash, have we answered the big question? Evaluate. I see lots of friends shaking their head no. That's right. If we go back to the big question, we need to figure out what fraction will be used to plant squash and what fraction of the garden will not be used for squash. I know that the rest of these pieces of the garden are not used for squash. I heard some of you describe the amount used not for squash as 6/4. Do you agree? Evaluate. I heard you say that you disagree because the numerator, the parts being described, should be 4 because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 parts of the garden without squash, and that number goes on top. The denominator should be 6 because it tells us the total number of equal parts in one whole, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total parts in one whole. Nice work. Thanks for working on that together. So remind me, what fraction represents the amount not used to plant squash? Yes, 4/6. How do you know? I heard you say that you know because each part is 1/6, and there are 4 parts or copies that don't have squash, so that's 4/6. Last year, scholars represented this situation with a number bond that looks like this. How does this number bond represent the situation? Say your answers out loud. That's right. This number bond represents the situation because 2/6 of the garden is for squash, and 4/6 of the garden is not squash. Together, 2/6 and 4/6 make 6 copies of 1/6, or 6/6, which is our whole. That's right. We can think about fractions as parts that when combined give us one whole. This is the same thinking that you learned in 2nd and 1st grade, that all the parts combined together or added together will give you one whole.